Welcome to Khealos' Gaming Table. I'm Khealos, and on this channel I talk about tabletop RPGs, miniature war games, and at least for another few days, rambling walks about whatever comes to mind. Still in Orlando, but today is my final Tuesday in Orlando. I have 3 more days of work, and then I fly out on Saturday. Words cannot express how excited I am to leave. I miss my life, I miss my dogs, I miss my bed. But today is Tuesday, October 31st, and it is Halloween. I have a lot of fond memories of Halloween growing up. I've also found that Halloween is different things to different people, and especially at different points in their lives. You know, when you're young, if you celebrate it, celebration is the word. You know, it's a time of wearing costumes, going out and getting candy. You know, when I was younger, we would go out and trick or treat. You know, going door to door, and strangers would hand out candy. Not sure if that is still a thing. I've heard stories that, and reports that they're working on phasing that aspect out. You know, because well, it's 2023, and people are weird and. Going door to door to strangers' houses is no longer acceptable. I've heard, there's like big events at different event centers where, kids can meet up, play games, still get candy, but, be a bit more supervised because, let's face it, when I was a kid, I went door to door with my friends. Rarely did we actually have an adult present. I don't think anyone's actually worried about, kids coming home with razor blades or drugs in their candy because, let's face it, nobody's going to put LSD or marijuana or anything in a kid's candy when they can take it themselves. That's just absolutely ludicrously silly. And anytime I've actually seen a report of, some kid, supposedly, got tainted candy, there's always a bunch of different things, or it's not from a reputable source, and I don't think I've actually seen a reputable actual incident, but it's not to say it won't happen. I just don't think it's as common as a lot of parents like to pretend or make it out to be. But yeah, dressing up, that's always fun. It used to be, dressed up as a monster or a demon or a devil or something like that because Halloween is based off of the old pagan holiday, Samhain. On tonight, the veil between worlds, weakens and different spirits come out, some malicious, some to teach a lesson. Sometimes you can commune with an ancestor, depending upon what your belief structure is. But, as America is wont to do, they'll take any sort of holiday and absolutely commercialize it to squeeze as much money as they can out of it, whether it be exorbitant amounts of money for, tiny containers of candy to hand out, or costumes. And not just, kids with sheets over their heads to look like a ghost, or somebody with, painted up. We're talking sometimes full-on cosplay that goes on. Seen some of those costumes that just look pretty good, and there are people that really get into it, especially the cosplay crowd that will go out of their way to make movie accurate costumes or as close to it as possible. I think it's a very cool hobby. I know it's expensive as hell, and if you think storing war game terrain or books or armies takes up a lot of space, just wait until you have, costumes that are sitting in a closet or in a room that you might wear once, maybe twice, and then, have to do a new one the next year, or if, that's part of your profession, because I've seen quite a few YouTubers that actually cosplay with a lot of different personas or whatever. That takes up a lot of real estate to store all that stuff. But, most of the costumes, when I was a kid, were fairly cheap, usually some sort of a thin plastic smock that you tied around the back, and a little mask that covered your face. It didn't even get a full head covering. But, that's changed, and manufacturers know that, if they produce something, people will buy it. And, that's how consumerism works. But, when you're a kid, if you celebrate, that was your thing. Cheap Halloween costumes, go out and get candy. As, you get older, usually it evolves into the actual Halloween party, where, depending upon if it's like in high school or college, there's probably going to be alcohol involved, the A word, usually possibly some drugs, depending upon, where you're at, who's throwing the party. One of the big thrills is going to a party like that, knowing that you're probably going to see some scantily clad nurses or things like that, because that is another tradition, at least when you get older with Halloween, is to see the sexy nurse, or look at what normally would be some sort of a psychopath that you would run from, but Freddy Krueger showing her midriff with some sexy makeup and a fake glove, all of a sudden Freddy Krueger's no longer quite as terrifying. Then it's not real. And again, some of your more serious cosplayers will get some more movie accurate costumes or go out of their way. I've never truly done that. I've done a couple of costumes, but usually involving clothing I already own. Like, I own a big oilskin duster, and I've used that several times as a trench coat or something else, as a part of whatever I'm cosplaying as. It's great for a Western, or if you're going the steampunk route, it's great for that as well. But I've never had the patience or, the money to do any serious cosplay, although I think it would be a lot of fun. It's one of those things that sounds great until you actually have to look at all of the things involved. And I've got, better things to spend my money on and my time. And I've been to quite a few of those parties. Those are a lot of fun. You can enjoy yourself. One of those times that I actually allowed myself to be somebody else and actually enjoy myself. Haven't really gotten into any trouble. I typically don't drink in public the few times that I do drink, so I'm usually the one that ends up as the designated driver. Or when I lived in California, usually me and a few friends were renting the bottom half of a house, and we would often throw parties there, and that's great because I like being able to stumble to my bedroom if I do partake, as opposed to having to rely on a designated driver, possibly walking home. But, Halloween is that time of the year where the seasons are changing, and sometimes have already changed. While it's like 83 degrees here in Orlando, back in Austin, I think the high is supposed to be like 40 something. It's going to be bloody chill there. And, the leaves are changing, sometimes they're falling. The seasons have changed, and it's usually where a lot of the horror movies start coming out. There's usually a plethora of new horror movies or sequels, as is, the case of Hollywood. And, you can also often look at where the state of the country was, based upon what the horror was. Like in the 50s, it was, alien invasion. That was the big thing. Some sort of monster attacking. In the 60s, you had a bunch of Hitchcock stuff. And a lot of that's more psychological horror as opposed to like graphic horror. And, even Psycho, it was in black and white, and a lot of it was implied. You didn't actually see anything. Even, when she was killed, they just showed, I think it was, paint being poured down the drain, as opposed to blood. But as, into the 70s and the 80s, all the suburbanites started getting afraid of, somebody sneaking into their ultra-secure home and killing them. You also had a bunch of the tropes start coming up, like, if you're not pure, if you have sex in a movie, you're gonna die. Bad as that is, a bunch of others, and that's where a lot of the slashers come from. And I personally am not a big fan of slasher flicks, mostly because invariably they turn into like a gore fest, and gore porn just doesn't do it for me. It's not my bag. If you want to scare me, scare me. If there's a little bit of blood or some gore, that's great, as long as it's in the furtherance of the story. But movies like Hostel and Saw, not that I've watched any of them, they're just situations where people get stuck, and you get to watch the new and interesting ways that they can be dismembered. And that's just not for me. I've seen a lot, at least of the first of many of the big slasher movies, whether it be Friday the 13th, Halloween, or the only one that I actually sort of enjoyed, which was A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original 1984 Wes Craven. And that movie actually scared the living hell out of me. I did have nightmares, and sometimes I still have nightmares. But I think it shows that how bereft of Hollywood is of ideas a lot of the times, because you look at a lot of the first of an installment, it's usually some sort of a fresh idea, something new. The director's often very young, and the studios are like, whatever, we'll give them some money, see what they can do, and stay out of it. Once a movie has made its money back and it's a success, whether it be a commercial or whatever, then that's when you start having studio meddling, as they want to get in on that. They want that producer credit, they want that writing credit, they want something where they can pat out their paycheck or say, yep, I was a part of that. And then that's when you get the dearth of sequels. The thing that I liked about Nightmare on Elm Street is it actually built up the tension. I mean, now everyone knows who Freddy Krueger is, they know the story, but when it first came out, the internet wasn't around, so you either heard by word of mouth, or you actually had to watch it like VHS, or if it was streaming on cable. But I found the idea fascinating and terrifying, that somebody who's dead could invade your dreams and still kill you. And yes, he did go through and start killing the kids in new and interesting ways, but there was a lot of, for me, actual horror, especially as you saw like the clawed hand coming out of the bathtub, or anything like that, because it wasn't jump scares all the time. There was actually some tension building. Wes Craven is a master of his art, and A Nightmare on Elm Street is cherry on top of his horror monument, his horror sundae, if you will. The thing that I really enjoyed about A Nightmare on Elm Street is towards the end, Nancy had enough of his shit and was going to figure out how to take him out. She went on the offensive. She had a plan, she stuck to it, and for the most part, it followed through. Naturally, it being a horror movie, rarely does it truly have like a happy ending, as if you watch the end of it, but horror movies typically are very cheap to produce. So if they make back their budget money and plus some extras, it doesn't matter if they're commercially panned or panned by the critics. Hollywood loves accolades, but it loves money more. Let's be honest. They're not giving money to produce a movie because of the artist's vision, or because this is the love letter to insert whatever era here. They're throwing the money at it because they want to make it back and then some. I mean, the Avengers, I think, cost, not a horror movie obviously, cost I think $350 to $400 million, which, let's be honest, that's a lot of money. But at the same time, it made $1.6 billion when all was said and done, and that doesn't include licensing, merchandising, all of that stuff. But that's the thing. After a certain point, sequelitis starts coming out, and all of a sudden, you've got Friday the 13th, Part 12, or whatever it is, and then, you've got Jason riding on a shark, jumping on a shark, and going into space, and I think the most interesting horror movie like that I really didn't watch, but, found interesting was, the Freddy vs. Jason movie. But again, this is the time of year where horror creeps into the popular culture, whether it's the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode. I'm not even sure if it's aired yet. I'll have to see if I can find it, but that's one of the... I used to be a huge Simpsons fan. It was a must-watch TV. But now that, The Simpsons has long since entered some sort of midlife crisis, I really haven't watched it in... a decade or more? Possibly longer. Except for the Treehouse of Horror. Usually, unfortunately, the Treehouses of Horror are hit and miss, but they're anthologies, so getting to see Kang and Khealos, that's always fun. And you can also tell what's popular at the time based upon what they put into the Treehouse of Horror, because they'll lampoon something that, that's in the news or some modern, project that's going on. That can be fun. TV shows will invariably have some sort of Halloween or horror episode, something spooky. I think one of my favorites was I forget the title of it, but it was a Quantum Leap episode where Sam jumps into, an actor playing, or somebody that was supposed to be a vampire or playing a vampire, does his shtick, does everything, turns, looks in the mirror, there's no reflection, as he realizes, holy crap, I actually was a vampire, and then boom, jumps into the next episode. When those are done really well, they can be a lot of fun, especially if they're not too serious. Supernatural, it's like Halloween for 26 seasons or however long the show went, Monster of the Week. But Quantum Leap, that's a science fiction show, not particularly horror filled. And I usually allow myself to watch something horror related. Again, it's not my genre. There are people that live for this season. But, horror isn't for me. It's not something I particularly enjoy, but when it's built into when there's something in the setting of something I like, I will check it out. I apologize to the writer because I don't remember his name, but for Battletech, they actually just put out a new anthology of a bunch of short stories that this person wrote, and I will see about finding it. You can get it on Amazon or just about anywhere that books and ebooks are sold. But it's a horror anthology of this thing called the Black Marauder, and effectively it's a Marauder 75-ton war machine, twin PPCs, twin lasers, AC-5, but there's something wrong with it. And by wrong, I mean somebody really needs to check their muffler or something. But this Marauder is corrupted somehow. There's stories of people that touch it and feel they're somebody walking over the grave, or something happens to them after it was pulled. It was found on a planet after it had been locked away in a cave. When they put it on the drop ship during the jump process, somebody went absolutely mad and threw themselves out of an airlock. And the person that eventually took over the Black Marauder went from, he got the Marauder because, well, it's a Marauder and they needed a war machine to fight. But the more he used it, the more he, for lack of a better term, bonded with it. His morals went away. He left the military that he had joined up with to help fight, the invaders, and ultimately went and joined a pirate gang. And yeah, the descriptions of it it's just off. The arms are longer. Apparently somebody was, I forget exactly how it worked, but effectively, according to the logs, somebody had gotten into the cockpit, but the cockpit was sealed when they found it, and there was no remains of that person. Somebody was, a tech was found, and the pilot was complaining about, some sort of issue with one of the leg actuators, and when they pulled it apart, they found a tech. I want to say that this is the case. And the tech was crammed inside of this, weapons cowling, or the leg actuator, excuse me, and just bizarre stuff. And it's the closest that I've really seen in BattleTech, which is, ignoring, giant stompy tanks, stompy robots, whatever. It's the closest that, there's horror or something supernatural in more of a hard sci-fi setting. There's another story in, I think it's the second issue of Shrapnel magazine. It's by the same author that wrote the Black Marauder short stories, and it's about this atlas. I think they called it the Ghost, maybe. I forget exactly. Check it out, issue 2. But it's got its own bay on Solaris, and the story goes that people that need something will go in and challenge, this Black Atlas, the Ghost of Solaris, whatever the name of it is. And if the challenge is accepted, you'll meet it on the battlefield, or in a Solaris arena, excuse me. And if you win, guess what? You get whatever you asked for. If you lose, well, you don't live long enough to worry about paying back your debt or whatever the case is. And that was a very creepy story, especially when, well, I don't want to spoil it, but if you get a chance to, if you have Shrapnel issue 2, it should be in there. It's like What Devil May Care or something like that. And that kind of stuff I do like as well. Star Trek has a history of having some sort of a spooky horror-ish episode. One of my favorites, oh god, I forget what the episode is, what the title of it is, but effectively a bunch of the crew on the Enterprise, is reporting fatigue, not sleeping well, nightmares, that kind of thing. And as the story progresses, they all come together for like, I have this dream, and suddenly all of them are having, kind of flashbacks. So they go to the holodeck, and, the room was dark, boom, the lights drop. And then, there was a table. No, it was a metal table, and, the scenery changes. There were some lights over here, and, all of a sudden, big, illumination onto the table. And as the various crew members continue to describe the situation from what they remember, unlocking additional memories, and there's like, I've been here before. And, Crusher examines Riker, and, his arm had been amputated and reattached. It was like 0.03 microns off, which isn't a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but it's just enough for his nerves to not report properly. As Riker goes to his cabin, his quarters, goes to bed, and as he lays down, the door, the chime rings. He's like, who the hell wants, why? I just went to sleep. Why are you here? And there's Geordi. Hey, come on, Riker. It's 600. We got to do whatever it is. Let's go to work. He's like, I just laid down. Riker was, I just laid down. Geordi responds that it's 0600. It is time to get started for the day. And that's kind of what sets it off. It's a very creepy episode as it unfolds. And that's the kind of thing that I like. Alien. Alien is probably my favorite horror movie, and while yes, people are going to say that it's it's a science fiction movie, I consider it a horror movie because if you transplant the situation to like a ship in the Pacific, it would be a horror movie there because they're stuck on a ship in space. There's an alien hunting them, and in true horror fashion, you don't see, there's not a big reveal until the end. There's lots of hints, lots of clues, lots of jump scares, but you don't really see the creature until the very end. I mean, even when it goes for Dallas, there's like a 2-second cut, and then boom, that's it. But it uses music to set the stage. Whether it's the fast-paced strings or whatever the case is, it sets the tension, and Alien has some absolutely great jump scares. The great thing about Alien is that, for about the first third of the movie, nothing really happens. They get pulled out of hypersleep. They, discuss, hey, we're not in our home system. What's going on? We pick up a beacon, and then they, go on the surface of the planet. There's some arguments there. They find the derelict ship. They go inside. And the rest is history. But the tension that Ridley Scott was able to build, the character interactions, you've got Parker, who, is this very blustery guy, but, he's also, kind of the strongman. Brett is the dude that, he's Parker's right-hand man. And the characters for me were believable. Truckers in space. None of these guys are heroes. None of them were young. I mean, I think Sigourney Weaver was the youngest. She was 25, 28. And, these are just men and women on a ship doing their job. Hauling ore from, point A to point B. Nothing special about them. They just got dealt a very shitty hand. Aliens took that concept and flipped it, because Aliens is more of an action movie, but with a horror survival aspect, as you've got a group of Marines that have survived, trying to make it, trying to survive until, the dropship can come down, or, whatever the case is. Alien, it's a toss-up between whether Alien or Aliens is my favorite movie. It just depends upon the mood that I'm in. Alien 3 did its best to recapture that vibe of the original Alien, but I think it would have been better if it had been just an escape pod that landed on the planet, not associated with aliens. Just, a lone survivor of a ship that had gone through. Because my biggest beef with Alien 3, and people are going to say, that's more realistic. I don't go to the movies strictly for realism. I go for escapism, and I do like it when my heroes actually survive. Aliens, Ripley bonds with Rebecca Jordan, Newt, and goes out of her way to rescue her. That's all moot because somehow an alien egg got on board. Something triggered the ejection of the pods, and Newt and Hicks were both killed as the pods, crash landed on the planet. It's kind of a jacked up ending to, the hero and, the damsel that was rescued. I didn't write the movie, but I liked it. Other than that, and I do think it would have been better had it not been Ripley. But again, it's water under the bridge. Another horror movie that I absolutely enjoy is John Carpenter's The Thing. And sure, that can be very gruesome, but again, there's a lot of tension built up. Who is the thing? Who is it? Could be any of them. The biggest tension is when they start, doing the blood test, setting the blood on fire, or burning it to see if, who's got a reaction, and watching, that paranoia build, that tension, and then as the creature starts to reveal itself, it's not CGI, it's all practical effects. All of that was models that the visual effects team put together, so from what I understand, busting ass, 18 hours a day to try and get it shot. But you don't get a lot of that anymore, because with the advent of CGI, you can actually show a lot more, and a lot of that mystery is gone, because one of the ways that some of that just gets so much built up in your mind is your imagination is going crazy, imagining what it looks like or where it is. But when it's revealed all the time in CGI glory, it's not nearly as creepy or scary or whatever. Jaws is a perfect example of that. Had Jaws been made 2005, I don't think it would have been the classic that it was, because one of the reasons that Jaws is such a well-remembered movie and a fun movie and a trendsetter was that you didn't see the shark until the end. Not really. Mostly because they couldn't get the shark to work. That's neither here nor there, but that actually paid off in dividends in, using John Williams' score to indicate, that something's going on. Quick cuts to, the shark's POV or, the victim. And, you might see it, bits and pieces of it, like when it's eating, I think the surfer. But you really don't see the shark until the very end, when they first see it and they start shooting the barrels into it. And that is, worked out for the best, because it allowed your imagination to fill in so many of the blanks. Jaws could, potentially be, kind of a horror movie as well, because you've got a damn near unkillable shark. Everything that you do doesn't even slow it down. 3 barrels to shoot into it. Nothing should be able to submerge, and they showed that on Mythbusters. But suspension of disbelief is, a big one, having to, when you watch a movie or a TV show. The X-Files is another one of those shows that used the creep factor a lot, and not every episode was an ick factor or creepy, but there were some that still haunt me to this day. The episode with the stretchy guy, Toombs, I think was his name. Just the way that they portrayed him, he still creeps me out, and it's great performance, great writing. Chris Carter, probably the best thing he ever created. Fantastic show, the cast. Sure there were aliens, sure sometimes there was some sort of a scientific explanation, but at the same time, there was some creepy ass stuff in that. Ignoring, the alien invasion and all of that, I did like the Monster of the Week aspect of it, especially, because one of the best things about that show is the interplay between Scully and Mulder. Scully being the scientist, the facts woman. She's a medical doctor, and she's got all this knowledge, and she doesn't believe in a lot of this stuff. And Fox Mulder, who is the poster child of the conspiracy theorist. I just thought that went really well. Those two went really well together. Let's see. You got a bunch of folklore that usually comes out. Whether it be vampires. Vampires are ubiquitous the world over. Just not the same thing, because most cultures have some sort of an evil creature, an evil spirit that feeds on the blood or the spirit of somebody. Because that's freaking terrifying. In general, humanity is the top of the food chain until, they get knocked off. And, Bram Stoker's Dracula is the blueprint for a lot of modern vampire myths. But at the same time, there's different myths from different countries that are similar in scale, because I think not scale, similar in tone, because, you know, fear is pretty universal. And I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why we do like horror. That thrill, that adrenaline rush. You know, we've got that fight or flight instinct, and having it triggered, you know, through a horror movie, you know, those jump scares, getting, you know, your blood pumping, but also the realization that, you know, it's just a movie or a TV show, it's not real. There's a thrill in that, and I think that's also why, you know, people like roller coasters. You know, in general, they're safe, and, you know, you can get on a roller coaster with the expectation of getting out the other side without any injuries. But that adrenaline rush, as, you know, you're whipping through a corner, going through the corkscrews, you know, whatever the case is, it gets that adrenaline flowing, that fight or flight, and I think that's, you know, why horror movies are so popular, as I said, because you get that thrill, that rush, that fix, whatever the case is. But when, you know, it's over, you see the credits, you know, unless there's like a post, you know, credit scene, which you know, it's a different story. But when you leave the theater, you turn off your television or whatever you're watching, you know, that's it. You know, the problem is, when I've watched horror movies when I was a kid, I've got an overactive imagination, and, you know, some movies that I watched 20, 30 years ago still live upstairs and can still give me a bad time. But coming to an end of this walk, you know, my little ramble about Halloween and horror and things like that. Do you like Halloween? How do you celebrate it? Have you celebrated it? What are some of your traditions? We used to hand out candy, and then people just really stopped coming around, and we just, you know, never really turned the light on that when we've got dogs. The last thing we want is to, you know, every 5 minutes or however long it takes, you know, for the dogs to go off. Time some, you know, a bunch of kids come by and knock on the door. But do you put out holiday decorations? You know, that is another thing that some people get very much into, spending a lot of money to put out a bunch of decorations. Something that I kind of miss, because I usually took the dogs for walks in the mornings around our neighborhood, and I get to see what's out. But, you know, I'm stuck in Orlando for going on 3 weeks now. But tell me about some of your Halloween traditions. Do you like horror movies? If you do you like the gory ones, or do you like the actual scares? All of the above? Go ahead and, you know, give this video a like. Give me some comments down below. Let's talk about it. But until next time, have a great night.